This is Debt Free in 30, where every week we talk to industry experts about debt, money, and personal finance. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Today we're going to talk about retirement. No, I'm not going to talk about how much you need to save before you retire. I'm not a retirement expert, so you don't want me doing that math for you. I'm a debt expert, and I happen to know that the fastest growing group of people who go bankrupt are seniors and people who are approaching retirement age. Older debtors, aged 50 and older, now account for 30% of all insolvency filings, up from 27% 2 years ago, and that number keeps growing. Senior debtors, people aged 60 and over, have the highest amount of unsecured debt of any age group when they go bankrupt, almost $70,000. A growing percentage of them even resort to payday loans to stay afloat. If you've got debt, retirement is very difficult. If you have trouble making your debt payments while you're working, it may be impossible to keep up when you retire and your income drops. Today, my guests are two gentlemen who've just published a book, and this is, I believe, one of the first podcast interviews they've done to talk about it. I've read the book, and I'm probably misinterpreting their main message here, but what I got out of it is that the concept of retirement is dead. Why? Well, for starters, it's not like the good old days where you worked for the same company for 45 years and retired with a full pension. It's hard to find anyone who has worked at the same company for more than 5 years, let alone 45, and most employers no longer offer company pensions. Now, that's not the only reason the concept of retirement is dead, I think, but you don't want to hear my opinions on it, so let's meet our guests. So guest number one, you're a returning guest, so let's get started. Who are you and what do you do?
Thanks, Doug. I'm Jonathan Chevreau, and I guess a couple of years ago we were on this podcast talking about my financial novel, Findependence Day. This book, Victory Lap Retirement, is the sequel, and it's been written with Mike Drack, who we're going to talk to shortly. Now, in the preface of the book, Mike quite wisely calls it a retirement book about not retiring. The subtitle of the book is Work While You Play, Play While You Work. So I think our message is, first of all, we're going to live a long time, maybe even 100. And if you're a senior in debt, there's really only one solution. You got to keep working, at least part-time. But work can be fun. You can work while you play and play while you work. So why don't we pass it over to Mike to talk about that?
Well, yeah, and I think that's a good introduction because you had, you're right, you were a guest back in season number 1. That was show number 5, which first aired on October the 4th, 2014, so about 2 years ago. This is now show number 108, and it's been exactly, like I said, 2 years. Findependence Day was, I guess, kind of the prequel to this book, and that's in fact what you say in this book. So let's hear your perspective then, Mike. So tell us your name and give us a bit of your background.
Hi, my name's Mike Drack, and I guess I'm a rare bird because I did work with the same employer for 36 years, and now I'm happily involved with planning and executing my own Victory Lap. It's something that came up once I was considering leaving my original job, and I really didn't know what to do at that point because I knew I needed a change. I knew I needed to leave where I was working for 36 years, but I didn't know if retirement was the right thing for me. So I did a lot of research. I read every retirement book I can get my hands on, and I finally figured out, no, you know what? Retirement isn't the answer for me. I wanted something different. And I came up with the idea of, why not continue working? But instead of, working at a job just to make money, I wanted to find a job that I could love, I could work for as long as I wanted. And money was a byproduct then. But, it was interesting, it was fulfilling, and it gave me a good reason to get up out of bed in the morning. So, I worked with Jonathan on this book. And, we put our heads together on it, and we think we came up with a good long-term solution for a lot of people out there.
And the name of the book is Victory Lap Retirement. And so at the start of the show, I said that, well, retirement is dead. And I said that nobody works for a company for a long time. Well, of course, you just disproved that. And I think, Jonathan, you had a fairly long career with a limited number of employers as well. So, but I don't think I'm wrong, and I think the gist of your book kind of talks about this as well. So, I mean, I said retirement is dead because we don't work for the same employers forever, but there are other reasons why it is potentially dead or changing as well. So, Mike, what are some of the reasons that retirement today, as we think about it, is completely different than what we would have thought about even 10 or 15 years ago?
I believe the word retirement is misused a lot today. It did make sense at one point. If you go back maybe 50 years or so, when they first came up with the concept of retirement, a lot of people, would retire, say, at the age of 65, but they, longevity at that time was short. And, they were lucky to spend maybe 1 or 2 years in the old rocking chair. Most people back then did physical jobs, and really when they retired, they weren't very active. They just kind of sat back and rested. So you had a very short term, or period of retirement, which kind of made sense. But now when you look at it, you could end up spending more time in retirement than you did in your working life. So you have, let's say, 30 plus years that you have to find something to fill those years. And so my definition of retirement is I would push it back until that period where, you want to withdraw. Retirement does make withdrawal or pulling back. So, you reach a point where physically you don't want to do certain things, or maybe it's at a point where you want to leave your house and move into a retirement home. To me, that means retirement. But the question is, okay, what do you do with that big gap from where you leave your primary career and reach retirement in, say, 20 or 30 years? You needed something to fill that gap, and that's where we came up with the term victory lap retirement. To us, victory lap retirement means that, we worked for a long time in our primary careers. We achieved financial independence, which we call the cornerstone of victory lap retirement. And then it's a time of celebration because, we've met most of our financial responsibilities. We took care of our families. We got them out of the house, hopefully at some point. And now it's our time to celebrate and do something interesting for us and, fill those next 20 years and develop a high quality of life.
And that makes sense. So, Jonathan, I want to bring you back into this then. So in this book, Victory Lap Retirement, in chapter 3, you talk about the 6 stages of the financial life cycle. And stage 1 is debt and frugality. So give me the overview of what that means.
Yeah, basically the human financial life cycle tracks the whole life cycle, but the financial life cycle, we basically start life as financial infants at age 18, roughly speaking. And the whole name of the game of retirement savings is over 30 or 40 or 50 years is to convert your human capital, your future earning potential, into financial capital for the day when you can no longer physically work or you can no longer find employers or clients. So we all start out, basically we're students, you're in debt, you have student loans, you have credit card debt. And there's no point, and people say about you should have a TFSA, there's no point in having a TFSA earning 1.5% in AGIC if on the other side you're owing 20% on your credit cards. So the first stage is to get out of debt. As Dee Dee says in Independence Day, you can't climb the Tower of Wealth until you dig yourself out of the basement of debt. So,
and I believe she also said freedom, not stuff.
Same thing, because it's basically, that should be tattooed on our foreheads, that every time you're going to make a purchase, you should stop yourself and say, do I want this stuff that's going to accumulate dust and rack up my credit card more, or do I really want freedom? Freedom and victory lap retirement, independence, all the same thing. We all want financial freedom, but you don't need it in retirement when you're 75 years old. You want it ideally, independence, in your 30s. There's a book called, I highly recommend it, The 100-Year Life. I'm just reading right now. Longevity. The millennials, a lot of them are going to reach age 100. Their working lifespans are going to be 80 years. Now, in the old state, if you remember The 3 Boxes of Life, a classic book, it was basically you spent the first 18 years of your life being educated, then you spent 40 years doing what Mike and I did, and you 20, 30, 40 years in the working, and then you got to stop and do nothing for 5 or 10 years. No way that nowadays, as you've pointed out, the author of the 4-Hour Work Week, what's his name? Tim Ferriss.
Tim Ferriss, yep.
Talks about mini retirements, and basically you have these multiple. We're going to go in and out, in and out, in and out of work, play, work, learn, work, play, learn, work, play, learn, work, play. And the key to be able to make those transitions, even when you're in your 60s or 70s, is financial independence.
And the foundation of that then is not having any debt. And obviously I keep harping back on that because this show is called Debt Free in 30. So your book goes into many, many areas. I'm just picking on the one specific one that I think would be of most interest to my listeners here. So, so let me read another quote from the book. Make breaking free, and maybe I'll turn this over to Mike to give his comments on, but make breaking free from the make breaking free from the chains of debt your first priority. Not only will debt limit your financial freedom severely, but it will suck the life right out of you. So what are you guys getting at with that phraseology?
Well, I can speak from my own experience. For many, many years when I was working in the corporate world, I had a fear of money. I had a fear of debt. And you live in fear because you can't afford your job or whatnot because you have to make the mortgage payments. You got to make sure, the kids go to school and you help pay with their education, all these things. So you're always living in fear of losing your job, of not being able to make those payments, of not being there for your family. So, you don't want to live in fear. Because it's not good for you. It causes a lot of stress and it can cause a lot of, health concerns and things like that. So the sooner you can get away from that burden of fear on you, the better you'll be. And it just opens up the world for you. So that's why we coach everyone. We say, as soon as you start working, you should start working towards financial independence right away and gain back your freedom, which gives you the flexibility to do different things. And it takes the pressure off and it opens everything up for you. But, you have to start right. You have to have the right habits to make sure that, you live a frugal lifestyle. You don't get carried away. You don't buy the latest sports car or you don't buy a house bigger than what you need. These are all important things. And today, unfortunately, I don't think we're teaching our kids well. I don't know why, but it seems that the people are coming out of school and going into, the workforce unprepared. And, they have to know that these are goals and these are important goals. And they think about these goals before they go out and buy something that they really don't need.
Freedom, not stuff.
Yeah. And we could do a whole podcast, probably, in fact, a whole series of podcasts on that particular topic. But what I find interesting about what you both said is you haven't been quoting me numbers. You did mention 1.5% interest in reference to a TFSA, and that's a pretty good rate of return if it's a savings type vehicle. What you've been talking about is much more, karma, stress, how, worried about money, worried about debt, all those sorts of things. There's another phrase in the book where you say, consider money to be stored life energy. Yeah. What are we talking about there?
That's from a classic book called Your Money or Your Life that a lot of financial planners are familiar with. And there they talk, and actually they have financial independence in the subhead of that title, Your Money or Your Life. And they basically talk about thinking of money as stored energy. Like to earn money, you have to exert energy. And so you exert the energy, somebody pays you $100. Now, before you spend it, you have $100 of your life energy. Now, we have very finite lives, 22,000 days, 22,000 nights, said the Moody Blues. Perhaps it's a little bit more nowadays.
I'm doing the math to see how many I have left, but okay, continue, 22,000, yeah.
Yeah, but every time you expend some money, you're expending your life energy. You can never retrieve that. I mean, money is potentially infinite, but your time to earn it is not. So the whole point of financial independence and the freedom that Mike was just talking about is that you need to not waste or squander the stored energy. Now, one of the corollaries too, apart from debt, and if you're no longer in full-time employment, is this concept of multiple streams of income. So if you were fortunate enough to spend 20 or 30 years in a corporate plan and you do have a pension, that may be a nice stream of income. So is the CPP, so is the OAS, does not preclude you from also working, continuing to deploy that life energy to create even more financial energy, which is what money is. And therefore, if you're still in debt, you certainly don't want, I mean, we say that the foundation of financial independence is a paid-for home. I still believe it. You shouldn't even think of going into retirement if you have mortgage debt, and certainly not if you have consumer debt. I think you'd agree.
I would absolutely agree. And like I said at the start of the show, seniors are the ones who we are seeing more and more than what we have in the past. They've got more debt than they've ever had before. And why that is, well, again, we could have a series of many different shows on that. I mean, one of the reasons is that's how our society is built. Nobody buys a car for cash anymore. You always get a car loan to buy a car. Nobody buys a house for cash anymore. You get a mortgage for 95% of the value because that's the way it's supposed to work. And obviously that comes back to bite you. So getting out of debt is the foundation, or is, you know, you got to do that first. I mean, if you've got debt, then you're totally pooched. Now, Mike, maybe you can elaborate on what Jonathan said about multiple streams of income. So in the old days, and I'm talking like an old codger here, but you know, in my day, we worked till we were 65. You died when you were 70. So there was only 5 years of retirement anyways. You got your pension check from your company. Maybe there was some small government money. That was it. But now the average person who lives to be 65 has a pretty good chance of living to be 90. Am I right? So and maybe I don't have a company pension because a lot of people don't, or if I do, maybe it's not as much as it used to be. What are some other than streams of income that can help mitigate the fact that I'm going to be living for a long time? Obviously, my medical expenses perhaps are going to increase as I get older. What are some other things I should be thinking about, not when I'm 65, but earlier, to sort of set myself up for that next stage of life?
So what we're looking at is creating, new sources of income. Active income from employment that could supplement, your pensions and your CPP and your OAS and things like that. So, some of the things we recommend to some people is maybe monetize a hobby. So thinking about, when you're at work and you have a hobby, maybe you like to do renovations or maybe design products or build Muskoka chairs and things like that. And to actually think about, okay, when I leave my primary career and I want to slow down the pace and I want to create new work that I find satisfying, which would be your hobby because, it's a natural extension of what you like to do, and then make additional income from that source. Or maybe branch into multiple activities that you like to do and make money from those sources. So you could even work part-time for, a company, and then you could monetize your hobby on the side and make money from those two sources. And you control them because you determine how much time you want to spend doing those activities and making money, and also to make sure you have sufficient leisure time to do these other things that you enjoy. So it's a complete rebalancing. So you have additional income coming in, which gives you an additional safety net, plus you're doing things that you enjoy, plus you're doing leisure things that you enjoy, and you have a fulfilling life.
And it's interesting when you say that, because what you're talking about is prepping for retirement by perhaps monetizing your hobbies, for example. Well, I like to do carpentry work, so why don't I build stuff for people? If I asked that question of a millennial, they would describe what you just described as a side hustle. That's the term they use, a side hustle. So I've got my main job working for the man, 5 days a week, but on the weekends I'm a bouncer or a bartender at the bar, or I sell things on Kijiji, or I teach yoga in the park or whatever. It's really exactly the same concept. It's finding more than one way to bring in money. And as I think about that, boy, that's a pretty good way to get out of debt too. Rather than just having your main source of income, as you get older, hopefully that income is going to be set aside for your retirement. But in the short term, it can be used to be paying off debt as well. So it becomes, there's really no reason not to do it other than time, I guess, is what it comes down to. But you also said it should be something you enjoy too. How important is that in this process? Because you're not saying work 80 hours a week and make as much money as you want or can. You're really saying the opposite. You're saying balance is much more important. Am I right in that?
That's right. When we talk about balance, what we're trying to say is, we're no longer focus solely on the pursuit of money. What we want to do is pursue fun and do things that are interesting and try new experiences, but at the same time trying to derive, some money from the activities. So, you know many people that go to, they love going to yard sales on the weekend and things like that. And they'll buy products and they'll sell them on eBay and things like that, but they enjoy it. And they make money at the same time.
So it becomes a way to make money as well as having fun. So, Jonathan, elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, I have a good example because we spent some time at a friend's cottage in Peterborough, which is really retirement country. And there's a festival of artists there. And what we found as we talked to the people and bought some of the art was a lot of them were former teachers. They were like retired teachers, had these wonderful pensions. My father had one, so I know. And yet they were still working. Their victory lap was they'd always, on weekends, just done, paintings of seascapes and things like that. And now they were like joining these 3-day art festivals, had little booths. They invested a little bit of time and energy, and maybe they had a couple students manning it for them. And they were selling these paintings for like $500 or $1,000. That's a perfect example. Similarly, music too. I know a lot of people who are, my brother, I mentioned in Victory Lap, he just had 60 on his bucket list was start a rock group. So he's in Waterloo. They're called Good Company. You can find them on Facebook. And at first it was to be on his bucket list. But then he said, I want to find out, I want multiple streams of income. I want music to be one of those streams of income. I know we mentioned also in the book somebody in the investment industry whose sister-in-law was a life coach. He decided he wanted to be an actor. Just last week we saw him in a film called The Big Fish or something like that, and it was so exciting to see this former guy who was like a little bit like Mike was about his former career, and he was on stage. He was on the film, the big screen, for about 3 or 4 minutes. Not a lot, but it was a paid gig. So absolutely you can turn a hobby into a real moneymaker. Even in Independence Day, there was a scene where Jamie, the character, turns his passion for vinyl records into a whole little business.
So there are many different ways to do it.
Yes, just following Jonathan's lead. I know in the book he mentioned one of his neighbors. I believe, is she 100 years old? That she works part-time to fund her visits to Niagara-on-the-Lake and the wineries, and she likes to go out there and test new wines and things like that. And that's what she uses to fund this hobby of hers, which I think is just interesting. But when you talk about artists, and these are artists that people that wanted to be artists all their lives, but they couldn't do it because they had to meet the responsibilities for their family. So they got corporate jobs as an example, and they worked hard for 35 years. And then later, after they retired by the old definition, they had the opportunity to go and pursue this passion, which is artist. And the interesting thing about artists is they don't retire. They work until they die because they love doing it. So I find that very interesting, and that kind of throws my thinking about retirement out the window, because why would you ever retire if you're doing something you love? And then I look at self-employed people, and if you notice, they work longer than salaried people in the corporate world because they, again, love what they're doing. Now, they might pull back a little bit. They might change the mix, take some of the pressure off, but they stay involved for as long as they want. And I just came back from a fishing trip with a group of people. The oldest one on the trip is 82, and he's a dermatologist in Little Rock, Arkansas, and he's still working 4 days a week. And the next oldest was 79. He semi-retired, sold his business to his son, but he still works 3 days a week. And everyone there was over the age of 66, and they're all still working, which I found quite interesting. So it kind of changed my thinking on the subject.
Well, and it sounds to me like they're not really working. They're doing what they like, but it meets the definition of work because someone's paying them to do it.
classic example would be the Beatles. When John Lennon was interviewed right at the beginning, they said, "Well, why are you doing this?" He saw Elvis Presley. He says, "That looks like a good way to living. Sure beats having a job. Plus, you can pull birds," he said, referring to the opposite sex. So, I mean, there's a classic example. They loved doing the music. They didn't stop. They didn't worry about the odds of becoming the Beatles. They were the Beatles. And they, of course, made so much more money than if they'd joined the local accountancy firm or whatever it is, banking, insurance, journalism, all those other supposedly secure careers. There's a lot more security actually in self-employment, as we talk about in the book, because what could be more insecure than having all your eggs in one basket? A traditional job where if you fall afoul of your boss, you're out of there. Your single stream of income just became no streams of income. When you're self-employed, you have multiple streams of income. Sad if you lose a client here or there, but you just replace it gradually. Again, the concept of multiple streams of income.
Yeah, and it's obviously something people have to think through because there are risks to being self-employed, and I guess technically I'm the co-founder and co-owner of Hoyes Michaelis and Associates, so it's Hoyes and Michaelis, the two of us, so we are technically self-employed. And you're right, the reason we're self-employed is we weren't great working for others, didn't like authority all that much, wouldn't have survived very long while we lasted as long as we could in the big accounting firms, but it wasn't our thing. There's more risk to that, but there is also obviously a lot more reward and a lot more control potentially over your life. But as you said, Mike, self-employed people tend to work a lot more than people in traditional industry anyways. That's just the way it is. So, okay, so let's kind of bring this to a logical conclusion and kind of tie up all the loose ends then. So the starting point, if I may put words in your mouth, is if you're moving into retirement, or frankly, if you're moving into the age of 30, you want to have as little debt or no debt as possible, because all these wonderful pictures you painted for us about artists painting by the river in Peterborough, well, if you got a boatload of debt, that's not happening. You're working multiple jobs because you have to. So that has to be the starting point. And then I think the second concept, again, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Mike, but retirement isn't something that starts at age 65. These multiple streams of income, the things that you like to do, can start tomorrow. And that's always my advice. I meet with lots of people who've gone through a layoff at work and they're having trouble. And I say, well, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I don't care if they're 40 or 50 years old when I ask them this question. If they say, well, I'd like to do X, I say, great, start doing it now. I love working with animals. Okay, go volunteer at the Humane Society today. You can start your victory lap immediately, even if you still have the traditional job. Am I right or wrong on that?
You can start setting yourself up for a victory lap, and that's what we counsel in the book is prior to jumping off, at least 5 years prior, you should start putting a plan together for your exit from, say, the corporate world, and figure out exactly what you want to do, what your strengths are, where your interests are, where your passions lay. And it's almost like you're deconstructing your corporate life, and you're looking at the blocks, and then you're starting to rearrange them. Maybe you'll throw out some ones you don't like and add some new ones, and find a new way of life in victory lap for yourself. But what you want to do is you want to create an exciting, fulfilling life. One that you want to wake up to every day, and you enjoy, this new combination of work and play, and it's very satisfying.
So let me ask you that same question then, Jonathan. So how do you advise someone to set themselves up for their victory lap?
As Mike says, it's certainly good to have a plan, and incidentally, you probably shouldn't let your boss know about it, he says. But on the other hand, we also have a chapter, or at least a section, called Sudden Retirement Syndrome. And the fact is, in this economy, a lot of people have no warning. They don't have 3 years to plan it. They got 2 hours to clear out the office. It's happened to most of us, particularly entrepreneurs. So I think you always, this is why I think I emphasize getting out of debt and having financial independence, even if you think you have a secure job. You may have another 5 years to implement the plan. You may have 2 weeks and a severance package that'll last you 6 months. So, but it's a lot easier to live on a severance package and maybe some of your multiple streams of income, take your pension early, CPP, whatever, if you have no debt. And debt is just this horrible boat anchor. So I'm pretty clear I'm opposed to it. So the key to a victory lap, again, is independence. Not just at 65. It's not the same as retirement. You should strive to be mortgage-free in your 30s, to be independent in your 30s. And then if the worst happens, you've got a safety net to take you to the next level.
Makes perfect sense. So for you, Jonathan, what does a victory lap look like?
Well, I suppose I've been on one for a couple of years now myself as well. I mean, for me, it's like I've got this website, the Financial Independence Hub, which is how Mike and I met. I still write for people like Money Sense and the Financial Post and Motley Fool Canada. So I still like writing, and it also helps promote the books and the website. Public speaking, both Mike and I go to Toastmasters every week because we want to hone that skill. Sharpen the saw, said Stephen Covey, I think it was. Maybe there'll be some revenue associated with that, maybe not. And then you have media appearances like this. So it's a self-fulfilling, snowballing process of financial independence, living out your dreams, doing your victory lap. For me, ultimately, the victory lap in my late 70s would probably be to write a book like this maybe every second or third year. The odd speaking gig, very limited writing because it becomes a little stressful after a while. And but I don't, like Mike said, I don't expect I'll ever actually retire in the full sense of the word.
It's just not something. So same question to you then, Mike. Paint us the picture of, your victory lap.
Well, somewhat similar to you, Doug, is, I reached a point in my life where I didn't want to work for someone else. I didn't want to be told what to do, and I wanted to do my own thing. So, I spent a lot of time. I went through a process of self-awareness to try to figure out, what did I like doing before I got caught up in all this work stuff and, trying to deal with debt and things like that. And I always knew in my heart that I liked helping people. You sit there and you try to help people, deal with things, either, paying down debt or giving them investment advice and whatnot, because I worked in the banking industry for a long time. So I said, I know that's what I want to do. But, I wanted to create my own thing where I could create my own hours. I could work as hard as I wanted to do, but I could still get the payoff and satisfaction from helping people. So, that's when I decided, we needed to write this book because I don't think retirement's being sold the way it should be. It's really changed and there's a lot of risk attached to it. And for some reason, people have this negative thing attached to continued working. It's almost like you're perceived as being a loser, which you're not. You're actually doing work that you want to do. And so I said, you know what? I can't find a job that kind of fits it, so I'm going to create my own. I'm going to become an author, and then I'm going to become a public speaker, and I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. So, there's one more book that, I'm going to twist Jonathan's arm and get him to commit to, and then I'm done, because writing a book's a lot of hard work. He told me from the beginning it was, and it's true, but it's very fulfilling. And public speaking and going out and talking to people and giving them some guidance and coaching with respect to creating their own victory lap is what I plan to do for the rest of my life. And blogging too.
Yeah, and I think that's fantastic, and that's a great way to end it. And when you guys get that next book written, then we'll come back on. We have Jonathan on every 2 years, so I guess it'll be 2018 or something. Then we'll have you guys back on. So the name of the book, Victory Lap Retirement. Work while you play while you work, the joy of financial independence at any age. And Jonathan, this book is available on Kindle right now, and the actual paperback version is going to be released around October 10th. Is that correct?
It'll be in bookstores there and independent bookstores and probably libraries, but you can actually order physical copies right now through, I think, Amazon, and also through Mike's website, victorylapretirement.com or victorylapretirement.ca.
Perfect. So what I'm going to do in the show notes is put links to all of this stuff where you can get a copy of the book, which I'm holding up to the microphone, which would be much more effective if this was video, I guess. And all of the things we've talked about. Jonathan's mentioned a few other books that are great resources and some other things. So I put all those notes in the show notes, which you can find at hoyes.com/podcast. HOYES.com/podcast, where we list all the different podcasts. We'll also post a transcript of this episode as well, and everything will be there. Gentlemen, thanks very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And that will wrap it up. Again, hoyes.com for links to everything we've talked about. I'm Doug Hoyes. Thanks for listening. That was Debt Free in 30.
Thanks for listening. This was Debt Free in 30.